You think black church Christmas dinners in the 1960s South were just ordinary holiday meals? Think again. These fellowship halls held some of the most soulful, resourceful, and lovingly prepared foods in American culinary history. Let's dig into 30 Christmas foods served at black churches no one makes anymore. Chitlin platters were the centerpiece of many black church Christmas dinners throughout the 1960s South. Candied yams arrived at every black church Christmas dinner in deep ceramic dishes, their surfaces glistening with butter and brown sugar that had caramelized into sticky sweetness. Church mothers sliced thick rounds of sweet potatoes, layered them carefully in baking dishes, and drenched each layer with butter, sugar, cinnamon, and nutmeg before slow baking until the edges turned golden and the centers became soft enough to melt on the tongue. Some cooks added orange juice or vanilla, creating variations that became signature recipes passed through families. The dish connected African American tables to West African traditions, where yams held ceremonial importance, though sweet potatoes had replaced actual yams in Southern cooking. Children fought over the corner pieces where the syrup had thickened into candy-like perfection. Candied yams were never just a side dish at church dinners. They were proof that sweetness and celebration could be created from humble root vegetables dug from southern soil. Collard greens with smoked turkey necks simmered for hours in massive pots in church kitchens, filling fellowship halls with an aroma that signaled Christmas had truly arrived. The greens were washed repeatedly, sometimes 7 times or more, because grit had no place at the Lord's table, and church mothers took this duty seriously. Smoked turkey necks replaced traditional ham hocks in many congregations during the 1960s, offering the same depth of smoky, salty flavor without the heaviness of pork fat. The greens cooked low and slow until they turned dark and tender, absorbing every bit of the seasoned broth known affectionately as Potlikker. Elders would sip that broth from small cups, claiming it held more healing power than any medicine. Vinegar, hot sauce, and red pepper flakes were added according to family tradition, and each church lady's pot tasted slightly different. Collard greens represented more than vegetables. They symbolized prosperity, and no Christmas plate was complete without a generous serving. Sweet potato pie held a place of honor at black church Christmas dinners, and only certain women were trusted to bake it. The pies were never made casually. They represented the signature of the matriarch, a recipe passed down through whispered instructions and watchful eyes in family kitchens. Sweet potatoes were roasted slowly until their sugars concentrated, then mashed smooth and mixed with eggs, evaporated milk, brown sugar, vanilla, cinnamon, and nutmeg. The filling was poured into buttery crusts and baked until the tops turned glossy and slightly cracked at the edges. Unlike pumpkin pie, which dominated white American tables, sweet potato pie carried African American flavor preferences, warmer, spicier, and deeply comforting. The first slice at church dinners always went to the eldest member present, and no one dared ask for seconds until everyone had been served. Sweet potato pie was legacy made edible, carrying stories of grandmothers and great-grandmothers in every bite. Fried catfish appeared at black church Christmas dinners as a beloved tradition that united entire congregations around fellowship tables. The fish were often caught by church members themselves from local rivers and ponds, cleaned carefully and soaked in buttermilk to remove any muddy taste. Fillets were dredged in seasoned cornmeal mixed with cayenne, garlic powder, and paprika, then fried in hot peanut oil until the exterior turned golden and crispy, while the flesh inside stayed white and flaky. The smell of frying catfish drew families from across the church grounds, and the sound of sizzling oil became the soundtrack of Christmas celebration. Served with hot sauce, always Louisiana or Crystal Brand, and slices of white bread for sopping, fried catfish transformed a simple fish into a feast. Leftovers were eaten cold the next day between bread slices, extending the joy of fellowship beyond the dinner itself. This dish proved that abundance could come from rivers and creeks when grocery money was scarce. Brown sugar-glazed ham served as the crowned centerpiece of black church Christmas dinners, its surface scored into diamond patterns and studded with whole cloves before being brushed repeatedly with a glaze that turned impossibly shiny during roasting. Church deacons often donated the hams, and the preparation was trusted only to women who had mastered the balance of sweet and savory that defined the perfect glaze. Brown sugar, mustard, pineapple juice, and sometimes a splash of Coca-Cola were combined into glazes that caramelized into sticky perfection as the ham slowly roasted. The meat was sliced thin at the serving table, each piece carrying traces of the sweet crust that had formed during hours of basting. Children gathered around, hoping for the crispy edges, while adults savored the smoky, salty meat that anchored the entire Christmas spread. The ham bone was never discarded. It went home with a church mother who would transform it into bean soup or collard green seasoning for New Year's Day. Cornbread dressing was sacred at Black church Christmas dinners, prepared according to recipes that church mothers guarded more closely than family secrets. The base was always cornbread, made from scratch days earlier and left to dry slightly, crumbled into large bowls and mixed with sautéed celery, onions, and sometimes bell peppers. Chicken broth was added by feel rather than measurement, and sage gave the dressing its distinctive earthy flavor. Some church ladies added boiled eggs or giblets, while others insisted on keeping the recipe pure. The mixture was poured into deep baking dishes and baked until the top turned golden and slightly crispy, while the center remained moist and savory. This was never called stuffing. That was for northern tables. Cornbread dressing stood on its own as a separate dish worthy of its own serving spoon and generous portions. The aroma of sage and onions baking filled fellowship halls with warmth, and the dressing disappeared faster than almost anything else on the table. Red velvet cake arrived at Black church Christmas dinners as a towering masterpiece of crimson layers and cream cheese frosting that made everyone pause before the first slice was cut. The cake's deep red color came from cocoa powder reacting with buttermilk and vinegar, though some church mothers added food coloring to achieve the most vibrant shade. The batter was mixed carefully to achieve a texture that was neither too dense nor too light, and the layers were baked in well-greased pans that had seen decades of holiday baking. Cream cheese frosting, tangy and sweet, was spread generously between layers and across the entire cake, sometimes decorated with pecans or coconut flakes. The cake was often displayed prominently on a cake stand, its beauty admired before anyone dared to cut into it. Children stared at the red layers with wonder, and adults remembered their own mothers and grandmothers making this same cake for generations. Red velvet was celebration itself, made visible. Smothered oxtails graced Black church Christmas tables as a dish that transformed what others considered waste into rich, luxurious stew that rivaled any expensive roast. The oxtails were first seared until deeply browned, then braised slowly in a base of onions, garlic, tomato paste, and beef broth seasoned with thyme, bay leaves, and sometimes allspice. The meat cooked for hours until it fell from the bones and the marrow melted into the sauce, creating a gravy so rich it could be eaten with a spoon. Church mothers who specialized in oxtails were celebrated throughout congregations, their pots emptying faster than any others on the serving line. The dish was served over rice that soaked up every drop of the dark, savory gravy. Oxtails required patience and skill. There were no shortcuts to the falling apart tenderness that defined the dish. What the world threw away, Black cooks elevated into something unforgettable, proving that love and time could transform anything into a feast. Ambrosia salad appeared at Black church Christmas dinners in large glass bowls, its layers of fruit, coconut, and marshmallows visible through the sides like edible stained glass. The dish combined canned mandarin oranges, pineapple chunks, maraschino cherries, shredded coconut, miniature marshmallows, and sour cream into a sweet mixture that served as both salad and dessert. Church mothers assembled it the night before, allowing the flavors to meld and the marshmallows to soften in the refrigerator. Children considered it pure heaven, piling their plates high with the sweet fruit and fluffy marshmallows. The name itself, Ambrosia, food of the gods, suggested the dish's special status at holiday gatherings. Some versions included pecans for crunch, while others kept strictly to fruit and cream. Ambrosia represented the abundance of Christmas celebration. a dish that could only be justified during holidays when sweetness was meant to overflow. Its pastel colors brightened buffet tables and brought smiles before the first bite. Hoppin John appeared at Black church Christmas dinners as a dish carrying spiritual symbolism and Southern practicality in every spoonful. The combination of black-eyed peas, rice, and smoked pork traced its roots to West African and Gullah food traditions, where rice and beans were dietary staples. Church mothers soaked the peas overnight, then simmered them slowly with onions, garlic, bay leaves, and whatever smoked meat was available until the broth turned rich. The rice was cooked separately and mixed in just before serving, each grain absorbing the smoky, savory liquid. Eating Hoppin John at Christmas prepared congregations for New Year's Day, when the dish was believed to bring good luck, the peas symbolizing coins and the greens served alongside representing paper money. Leftovers were never wasted, but transformed into skippin' jenny, a sign of frugality that was itself considered virtuous. This dish stretched to feed large families and proved that humble ingredients could carry deep cultural meaning. Peach cobbler arrived at Black church Christmas dinners bubbling hot in cast-iron pans, its golden crust giving way to sweet fruit that had caramelized around the edges. Though peaches were summer fruit, church mothers preserved them in jars or used canned peaches during winter months, ensuring this beloved dessert could grace holiday tables year-round. The crust was more rustic than pie, sometimes spooned over like dumplings, other times rolled into golden perfection, seasoned with cinnamon, nutmeg, and lemon juice to brighten the sweetness. The cobbler would hiss as it cooled, the sound announcing something wonderful awaited. Served hot with vanilla ice cream or just a splash of cold cream, peach cobbler was ceremonial food made for Sunday dinners and Christmas celebrations. The corner pieces, always a little more crust, always claimed by the eldest at the table, were fought over quietly. For many, the memory of that golden crust and syrupy filling lives longer than any recipe card ever could. Smothered chicken graced Black church Christmas tables as a dish that transformed yardbirds into something approaching luxury through patience and cast-iron skill. Whole chickens were cut into pieces, seasoned with salt, pepper, and paprika, then dredged in flour and fried until golden in skillets that had seasoned flavors baked into their surfaces from decades of use. The magic happened next. The chicken was returned to the skillet with sautéed onions covered with broth and simmered slowly until the meat became fall-apart tender. The gravy that formed was rich and golden, thickened naturally by the flour coating and rendered chicken fat. Church mothers who mastered smothered chicken were celebrated throughout congregations, their dishes emptying before others on the serving line. Served over rice or alongside cornbread for sopping, this dish proved that Southern cooking was about transformation, taking simple ingredients and elevating them through time and love into something unforgettable. Potato salad held sacred status at Black church Christmas dinners, and every church mother believed her recipe was the definitive version. The potatoes were boiled until just tender, never mushy, then cubed and mixed while still warm so they would absorb the dressing better. Mayonnaise formed the base, but the additions varied by family tradition: mustard for tang, sweet pickle relish for brightness, hard-boiled eggs for richness, celery for crunch, and sometimes a touch of sugar to balance the acid. Paprika was sprinkled across the top like a blessing, its red color signaling that this dish had been prepared with care. The salad was made the day before and refrigerated overnight, allowing the flavors to meld into something greater than the sum of their parts. Arguments about the proper texture, creamy versus chunky, divided congregations more than any theological debate. Children would sneak spoonfuls before dinner was served, and adults judged the quality of the entire Christmas spread by the first bite of potato salad. Giblet gravy poured over everything at Black church Christmas dinners, its rich brown color and complex flavor elevating even the simplest dishes into something special. The gravy began with the giblets, heart, liver, and gizzard, simmered in broth with onions, celery, and bay leaves until tender enough to chop fine. The cooking liquid became the base, thickened with a roux of flour and pan drippings from whatever meat had been roasted that day. Church mothers stirred constantly to prevent lumps, adjusting seasoning with salt, pepper, and sometimes a splash of Worcestershire sauce for depth. The chopped giblets were stirred back in, adding texture and concentrated flavor to every ladleful. This gravy tied the entire Christmas plate together, poured over cornbread dressing, rice, and sliced turkey or ham alike. Nothing was wasted in its making, and nothing on the plate was considered complete without it. Giblet gravy represented the philosophy of black Southern cooking. Use everything, waste nothing, and make it delicious. Neckbones and rice appeared at black church Christmas dinners as proof that the most flavorful cuts were often the ones others overlooked. Pork neckbones were cheap and considered undesirable by many, but church mothers understood that bones meant marrow, and marrow meant richness. The neckbones were first browned in a heavy pot, then simmered for hours with onions, garlic, and seasoning until the meat fell from the bones and the broth turned silky from rendered collagen. Rice was cooked in that same broth, absorbing every drop of the smoky, porky flavor until each grain glistened with richness. The dish was served in deep bowls, the tender meat piled over rice with plenty of potlikker for sopping with cornbread. Children learned to navigate around bones, sucking out every bit of marrow and meat their elders had taught them to value. Neck bones and rice represented the ingenuity of black cooks who turned what others discarded into dishes that satisfied both body and soul during the leanest times. 7-Up pound cake stood tall on black church Christmas dessert tables, its dense golden crumb and subtle citrus flavor making it one of the most beloved cakes of the era. The secret ingredient, a full bottle of lemon-lime soda, gave the cake a tender texture and light sweetness that distinguished it from traditional pound cakes. Church mothers creamed butter and sugar until fluffy, added eggs one at a time, then alternated flour with the fizzy soda until the batter reached perfect consistency. The cake baked slowly in a tube pan until a toothpick came out clean and the top turned golden brown. Some versions were glazed with a mixture of powdered sugar and lemon juice, while others were served plain, their simplicity their greatest virtue. 7-Up pound cake traveled well, sliced easily, and kept for days. All practical considerations for church dinners where food had to feed crowds. The cake represented mid-century ingenuity, using a commercial product to achieve results that felt homemade and special. Banana pudding with meringue crowned black church Christmas dessert tables as a towering testament to patience and skill. Unlike modern versions made with instant pudding, church mothers cooked custard slowly on the stove, stirring constantly until it thickened enough to coat a spoon. Vanilla wafers were layered with sliced bananas and warm custard in deep dishes, the cookies softening as they absorbed the creamy filling. The glory was the meringue, egg whites beaten by hand until stiff peaks formed, spread across the top, and browned in a hot oven until golden tips emerged. The contrast of textures, soft custard, tender cookies, creamy bananas, and airy meringue, made every spoonful an experience. Church mothers who mastered the meringue without it weeping were celebrated throughout congregations. Children stared at the golden peaks with wonder, while adults remembered their grandmothers making this same pudding for generations. Banana pudding was love made visible, layered carefully in dishes that told stories. Chess pie arrived at black church Christmas dinners as a simple custard pie that proved dessert magic could come from pantry staples alone. The filling required only butter, sugar, eggs, cornmeal, and a splash of vinegar or buttermilk for tang, ingredients every household already had on hand. Church mothers mixed these simple components into a batter that baked into a dense, sweet filling with a slightly caramelized top and a texture somewhere between custard and candy. The cornmeal gave it a subtle grittiness that distinguished it from other custard pies, while the acid balanced the sweetness perfectly. Chess pie was often called the poor man's pie because it needed no expensive fruit or nuts, yet it satisfied sweet cravings completely. The origin of its name remained mysterious. Some claimed it came from cheese pie mispronounced, others from chest pie because it kept well in pie chests. Whatever the name's origin, chess pie represented the genius of making abundance from scarcity. Fried corn appeared at black church Christmas dinners as a side dish that elevated simple field corn into something approaching decadence. Fresh corn was cut from the cob, but the real secret was scraping the cobs afterward with a knife to extract the milky, starchy liquid that would thicken the dish naturally. The corn and its milk were fried slowly in bacon drippings with butter, salt, pepper, and sometimes sugar until the mixture became creamy and the natural sugars caramelized. Church mothers stood over skillets, stirring constantly, knowing that a moment's inattention could scorch the corn. The finished fried corn was rich, sweet, and savory all at once. Nothing like boiled corn served at other tables. Though Christmas fell outside fresh corn season, church mothers preserved corn from summer or used canned corn, adapting the technique to whatever was available. Fried corn proved that cooking skill could transform ordinary vegetables into extraordinary dishes worthy of holiday tables. Chow relish appeared in mason jars at every black church Christmas dinner, its tangy sweet crunch providing the perfect counterpoint to rich meats and heavy sides. This pickled relish combined green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, and peppers with vinegar and sugar, creating a condiment that church mothers had canned during late summer for holiday tables. The preparation required patience. Vegetables were chopped fine, salted overnight, then cooked with spices until the kitchen filled with sharp, vinegary steam. Each family's recipe varied, some adding mustard seed, others preferring heat from cayenne. Chow was spooned over black-eyed peas, layered onto ham sandwiches, and eaten straight from the jar by those who couldn't wait. The relish represented the Southern tradition of putting up food, preserving summer's bounty for winter celebration. No church Christmas spread was complete without at least 3 jars of homemade chow, their contents glowing amber and green through the glass. Pickled pig's feet sat in large glass jars at black church Christmas dinners, their gelatinous texture and tangy flavor dividing congregations into devoted fans and firm avoiders. The feet were cleaned meticulously, boiled until tender, then packed into jars with hot vinegar brine seasoned with bay leaves, peppercorns, and red pepper flakes. Church mothers who mastered pickling were celebrated for transforming what others discarded into a delicacy that kept for months without refrigeration. The meat was eaten cold, pulled from the bone with fingers that got sticky from the natural gelatin. Children watched with fascination as elders savored these strange-looking treats, the vinegar's sharpness cutting through the rich, porky flavor. Pickled pig's feet represented the waste-nothing philosophy of black Southern cooking. At Christmas dinners, the jars were placed alongside crackers and hot sauce, offering a taste of tradition for those who remembered when such preserved meats meant survival. Hog maw stuffed with sausage and vegetables appeared at black church Christmas dinners as a dish that showcased the ingenuity of turning humble ingredients into celebration food. The pig's stomach was cleaned thoroughly, a process that took hours and required strong hands and patience, then stuffed with a mixture of seasoned sausage, potatoes, cabbage, and onions before being slow roasted until the casing turned crispy and the filling became tender. Church mothers who prepared hog maw were respected for their skill and dedication as the dish demanded attention from start to finish. The sliced portions revealed layers of meat, vegetables, and savory juices that had melded during hours of cooking. Though not everyone appreciated the texture, those who grew up eating hog maw considered it essential holiday fare. The dish represented the tradition of using every part of the hog that sustained black families through generations of hardship. At Christmas, hog maw carried both practical nourishment and cultural memory in every slice. Cracklin bread arrived at black church Christmas dinners as cornbread elevated by the addition of crispy pork skin that added richness and crunch to every bite. The cracklings, bits of rendered pork fat and skin fried until golden and crispy, were folded into cornbread batter just before baking, distributing pockets of porky goodness throughout the bread. Church mothers used cracklings saved from hog killing season, stored in lard to keep them fresh until the holidays arrived. The bread baked in cast iron skillets preheated with bacon grease, creating a crust that shattered when broken. Each piece revealed the treasure within: golden cracklings that had softened slightly during baking, but still provided textural contrast against the tender cornmeal. Cracklin bread was fought over at serving tables, with elders claiming the corner pieces where extra cracklings had settled. This bread represented the resourcefulness of black cooks, who turned byproducts of butchering into something that made ordinary cornbread extraordinary. Rutabagas mashed with butter appeared at black church Christmas dinners as a humble root vegetable transformed into something elegant through patient cooking and generous seasoning. The large purple-topped roots were peeled, cubed, and boiled until tender enough to mash smooth, then whipped with butter, salt, pepper, and sometimes brown sugar to balance their earthiness. Church mothers who grew rutabagas considered them essential winter fare, hearty vegetables that stored well and provided nourishment when little else was available. The mashed rutabagas were served alongside candied yams and collard greens, their pale yellow color providing contrast on plates dominated by darker dishes. Children often approached them with suspicion, but those who tasted them discovered a flavor both sweet and savory that complemented holiday meats perfectly. Rutabagas represented the practical wisdom of Southern cooking, growing what thrived in poor soil and transforming it into something worth celebrating. Black-eyed pea fritters appeared at black church Christmas dinners as crispy appetizers that turned leftover peas into something new. The peas were mashed and mixed with flour, egg, onion, and spices, then dropped by spoonfuls into hot oil where they puffed into golden rounds. Church mothers made these fritters to stretch ingredients and provide finger food for children who couldn't wait. The exterior shattered with each bite, revealing soft, savory centers flavored with garlic and cayenne. These fritters traced their roots to West African Okra, connecting African-American tables to ancestral traditions that survived the Middle Passage. Served hot with hot sauce for dipping, the fritters disappeared quickly. They represented the creativity of black cooks who transformed any ingredient into something worth eating. At Christmas, black-eyed pea fritters offered a preview of New Year's luck. Molasses stack cake towered on black church Christmas dessert tables as a monument to community cooperation and Appalachian tradition embraced by black families. The cake consisted of thin, cookie-like layers spread with spiced apple butter or molasses filling, stacked 6 high until it resembled a sweet mountain. Church mothers contributed individual layers, each baked in their own kitchens, then assembled at the church. The cake was wrapped and left to rest for days, allowing the filling to soften the layers into something approaching spice cake. Molasses provided the distinctive dark sweetness that sugar alone couldn't achieve, connecting the cake to an era when refined sugar was too expensive. Each slice revealed striped layers that told stories of hands that had mixed and baked. Molasses stacked cake was community-made visible, proof that celebration required cooperation. Egg custard pie graced black church Christmas dessert tables as a simple creation, proving elegance needed nothing more than eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla combined with skill. The custard was mixed gently, poured into unbaked pie shells, and baked slowly until the filling set with the slightest wobble. Church mothers who mastered egg custard pie were celebrated for achieving the silky texture that separated perfect custard from rubbery failure. Nutmeg was grated fresh across the top, its speckled pattern signaling care. The flavor was pure and comforting, not too sweet, not too rich, but balanced. Children often requested egg custard pie over fancier desserts because its familiar taste felt like home. The pie represented the beauty of restraint, proving that simple ingredients handled with care could satisfy as deeply as any elaborate confection. Hot water cornbread appeared at black church Christmas dinners as small fried cakes perfect for sopping up potlikker and gravy. The batter was made by pouring boiling water over cornmeal with salt, creating a paste shaped by hand into small oval patties. These were fried in hot oil until the exteriors turned golden, while the insides stayed dense and chewy. Church mothers stood over skillets frying batch after batch, the smell filling fellowship halls with warmth. Hot water cornbread was meant to be eaten immediately, passed in napkin-lined baskets while still crackling from the fryer. Unlike baked cornbread, these fried cakes offered textural contrast. Crunchy outside, soft inside. irresistible for dragging through greens or beans. The technique required no fancy ingredients, just cornmeal, water, and skill. Red punch flowed from large glass bowls at every black church Christmas dinner, its bright crimson color signaling celebration before the first sip touched lips. The punch combined fruit juices, ginger ale, and sometimes sherbet into a sweet, fizzy drink that children and adults couldn't resist. Church mothers mixed it in proportions passed down through generations: pineapple for sweetness, cranberry for tartness, soda for sparkle. The red color carried significance, connecting to West African hibiscus drinks and symbolizing joy. Punch bowls were refilled throughout dinner, ladles clinking as cup after cup was poured. Children circled back repeatedly, lips stained red. Red punch represented the communal aspect of church dinners, everyone sharing from the same bowl, connected through the act of drinking together. No Christmas dinner was complete without that bowl of red glowing under fellowship hall lights. Okra and tomato stew was the soul of summer on a spoon. The okra simmered down in ripe tomatoes until it turned silky and thick, with peppers and onions joining the mix. It was a dish that knew patience, slow-cooked until every flavor came together like harmony in a choir. The stew was spooned over rice, the juice soaking in just enough to warm you from the inside out. It told the story of fields, faith, and family, of making something rich from what the earth freely gave. Each bowl tasted like history preserved and love made visible. It was the kind of food that drew people close, that made you linger at the table just a little longer. The tang of the tomatoes met the earthiness of the okra, and together they sang of home. A little spice woke it up, but the comfort always remained. Even when the pot was scraped clean, the scent clung to the air, humble, wholesome, and full of grace. Black-eyed peas with ham hock simmered in church kitchens year-round but held special significance on New Year's Day, when congregations gathered to eat them for luck and prosperity. Dried peas were soaked overnight, then cooked slowly with a single ham hock that released smoky, salty flavor, while onions and garlic added depth. The result was creamy beans in thick pot liquor served as soup or over rice, with ham hock's meat pulled from bone. Churchwomen understood a little meat went far when combined with beans, providing protein without the expense of steaks beyond most budgets. Black-eyed peas cost almost nothing, with dried bags available for pennies, perfect for feeding large crowds after Sunday service. The dish carried deep cultural significance, connecting congregations to Southern agricultural traditions and New Year's customs promising good fortune. Children ate them without complaint because Potlikker's richness made beans taste special, while adults appreciated both nutrition and continuity with tradition. Peach cobbler with pie crust strips was the kind of dessert that reminded people what home felt like. You could smell it before you even made it through the church door, that mix of cinnamon, butter, and baked peaches rising through the air like a sweet hymn. Someone's grandmother had brought it from home, wrapped tight in foil and tucked safely in the trunk of her car, so it would still be warm when service ended. The peaches were always ripe, soft from syrup or from the summer heat, and they melted into the crust like gold under sunlight. The pie strips were laid carefully across the top, never in perfect lines but always with love, brushed with melted butter until they baked into crisp ribbons that cracked softly with every scoop. A bowl of peach cobbler was more than dessert. It was reward for long sermons, for tired weeks, for the kind of patience that came from faith and family. The sweetness clung to your tongue and made every bite feel earned. No matter how many tables were filled with cakes or puddings, this one was always gone first. The elders called it real dessert, and the children licked their spoons clean, knowing this was what happiness tasted like. Wild plum. Chutney offered a burst of tart sweetness when sugar was scarce and fruit trees grew untended along plantation edges. Gatherers picked the small, deeply colored plums at peak ripeness and simmered them slowly with a little honey or molasses when available, along with wild herbs for spice. The result was a tangy preserve that enlivened cornbread, salted meats, or simple porridge, providing vitamins and variety in otherwise plain meals. This method of combining fruit with savory seasonings echoed West African chutneys and relishes, demonstrating a culinary bridge between continents. After freedom, African-American home cooks continued to prize wild plums for jellies and sauces, and many Southern families still make small-batch plum preserves each summer. The enduring appeal of wild plum chutney lies in its ability to turn overlooked fruit into a bright condiment that brightens any table. It stands as a flavorful link between survival cooking and the rich tapestry of modern Southern preserves that celebrate both heritage and the gifts of the wild landscape. Okra gumbo with fresh crab told the story of low-country waters and West African roots in every bowl. Thickened by the natural mucilage of okra and deepened with a slow-simmered stock, the stew held blue crab, onions, bell peppers, and fragrant spices that reflected both coastal bounty and ancestral memory. Fishermen brought the catch of the day to markets where cooks bargained for the sweetest crab meat, while home gardeners plucked tender okra pods from vines that thrived in humid summers. The gumbo pot became a gathering place where family and neighbors stood around sharing stories as the aroma of seafood and spice filled the air. Served over rice, each spoonful carried the taste of tides, soil, and a heritage that stretched back across the Atlantic. In modern times, many turned to faster recipes and frozen ingredients, losing the patient layering of flavor that once defined this dish. Yet for those who remember, nothing matches the soulful depth of a true okra gumbo made with freshly caught crab. Candied yams were memory disguised as dessert, gleaming under syrup that caught the light like stained glass. They started as humble sweet potatoes, peeled and sliced by hand, then simmered with butter, sugar, and a whisper of cinnamon until they melted into themselves. Every forkful felt like Sunday comfort, the kind that lingered even after the plates were cleared. The smell filled every corner of the church hall, warm and familiar, bringing people back to childhood kitchens. There was something sacred about watching elders spoon them out with quiet pride. This dish did not need decoration. It already carried the glow of love. The yams were passed down like stories, like names, unchanged through generations because nothing about them needed fixing. When people said, "sweet," this is what they meant. The caramel syrup bubbled thick and glossy, coating every piece in warmth, the kind that stuck to memory long after taste faded. Sometimes a sprinkle of nutmeg or clove gave it a deeper note, but never too much. The sweetness spoke for itself. Candied yams did not rush. They took their time, slow and sure, like all things made with patience and heart. On church tables, their color alone brought smiles, that deep orange glow of comfort that meant home had arrived. Sweet potato pie with nutmeg was the signature dessert distinguishing African-American church suppers, a pie so beloved that families guarded recipes and church mothers competed silently. Sweet potatoes were roasted until tender, then mashed smooth and mixed with eggs, evaporated milk, brown sugar, butter, vanilla, cinnamon, and generous nutmeg that gave filling its distinctive warmth. The mixture was poured into flaky crusts and baked until filling set firm, but remained creamy, with tops developing slight sheen. Churchwomen made multiple pies for every supper, knowing sweet potato pie would disappear quickly. Sweet potatoes were inexpensive year-round and stored well in pantries, making them practical for feeding dozens. The pie represented African-American culinary tradition at its finest, with roots tracing to West African yam preparations. Children grew up knowing sweet potato pie was superior to pumpkin pie, understanding this was their dessert, their tradition, their taste of home. Cornbread dressing had the power to hush a crowded room. Crumbly, golden, and rich with sage and broth, it was the dish everyone waited for. It started with leftover cornbread, dried and crumbled, then mixed with onions, celery, and whatever broth simmered on the stove that day. The smell rose thick and savory as it baked, the edges crisping just right. It carried the weight of care, a dish that took planning, patience, and heart. At church suppers, people lined up twice just to get another scoop. It was heavy with meaning, like Sunday itself, feeding body and spirit in equal measure. Each bite was tender but bold, soaked through with flavor and memory. The secret was always in the seasoning. Not just sage, but the way it was stirred by someone who knew exactly when it felt right. It was a dish that demanded respect, the kind that made silence fall between bites. Cornbread dressing was not made quickly. It was built layer by layer, like prayer. Even when the pan was scraped clean, the smell lingered, wrapping the room in something that felt a lot like gratitude. Watermelon rind stew reflects the creativity and endurance of people forced to survive on the edges of the plantation food system. The sweet red fruit was usually reserved for those in the owner's household, but the pale green rind, often thrown away, became a valuable ingredient for the enslaved cooks who transformed scraps into nourishment. Strips of rind were simmered slowly with onions, garden herbs, and whatever seasoning could be gathered or traded, creating a mellow broth rich in minerals and gentle sweetness. This practice traveled forward in time, inspiring the pickled watermelon rind that remains a hallmark of Southern home kitchens today. The dish is more than a recipe. It is a record of resilience, showing how African culinary knowledge turned waste into sustenance and flavor. In modern celebrations of African American foodways, watermelon rind pickles and stews continue to honor those who preserved health and dignity through skilled cooking even when denied basic freedom. Buttermilk cornbread baked in cast iron anchored countless suppers with its golden crust and tangy bite. The heavy skillet, seasoned from years of use, gave the bread a flavor impossible to match in a modern pan. Families stirred cornmeal with fresh buttermilk, a little lard, and a pinch of salt, then listened for the satisfying hiss as the batter hit hot iron. The result was a loaf both crisp at the edges and tender inside, perfect for soaking up potlikker from simmered greens or for eating plain with a drizzle of cane syrup. Grandmothers often taught their grandchildren to test the heat of the skillet by flicking in a few drops of water, a small ritual that connected generations. On Sundays after church, the scent of baking cornbread drifted through neighborhoods, promising a meal that united family and friends. Today, prepackaged mixes and quick breads have replaced the slow, careful method that once defined African American kitchens, and the art of true cast-iron cornbread grows rarer with each passing year. Chicken wing stew was one of those meals that would surprise modern ears, since wings were once the cheapest part of the bird. My grandmother bought them in bulk when she could, piling them into pots with onions, celery, and carrots. Slowly simmered, the wings gave up their fat and flavor, turning thin broth into rich gravy. She thickened it with flour or cornstarch, serving it hot over rice or bread to stretch it even further. It was messy eating, but no one complained because the taste was so comforting. Wings may be prized today, but in the 1960s they were scraps, turned into nourishment by clever hands. She said every part of the bird had value if you treated it with respect. Chicken wing stew carried the spirit of thrift, transforming what others dismissed into something that filled the house with warmth. It was proof that good cooking did not depend on wealth, only patience and care. Corn pudding was quiet in its beauty, but it had a way of humbling every plate beside it. Sweet and custardy, it shimmered when it came out of the oven, golden on top and tender within. It started from simple things, eggs, milk, and corn cut fresh from the cob, but it ended as something sacred. This dish spoke of gardens tended by hand, of rows of corn tall enough to touch the sky, and of cooks who turned harvest into grace. Grandmothers measured nothing, just poured and stirred until the texture felt right, tasting the batter with the edge of a spoon. When it baked, the kitchen filled with the kind of smell that made you stop what you were doing. It was soft and creamy, slightly sweet, with little bits of corn giving it a rhythm all its own. At church dinners, it disappeared quietly, spoon by spoon, without needing praise. It was not fancy, but it was honest. And that made it unforgettable. Every family had their own little trick, a splash of cream here, a dusting of nutmeg there. But no matter how it was made, it always carried the same heart. You could find it on tables beside roast chicken, collard greens, or baked macaroni, holding its own with quiet dignity. It was the kind of dish that reminded everyone that love did not have to shout. Sometimes it simply glowed. Mustard potato salad appeared at every church supper in large bowls, its bright yellow color from prepared mustard distinguishing it from mayonnaise versions and giving it tangy sharpness that cut through rich meats. Potatoes were boiled until tender, then cooled and diced before being mixed with chopped onions, celery, hard-boiled eggs, sweet pickle relish, mayonnaise, and generous squirts of yellow mustard. The result was creamy and tangy with textural variety from crunchy vegetables and creamy potatoes, served cold during long gatherings. Churchwomen made potato salad in enormous quantities, knowing it was essential accompaniment to fried fish, barbecue, or any main dish needing starchy, cool contrast. Potatoes were among cheapest vegetables available year-round, with 10-pound bags costing less than $1. The mustard added minimal cost but maximum flavor. Families developed strong preferences for their church's version. Which Black church Christmas food would you bring back to the table? Drop your memories in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe so we can keep serving up these forgotten flavors together.